missed a lot. So much. We got through almost everything yesterday.
Yesterday I got ready to go to school, and after that my daughter just grew up. I had to rush her to the hospital.
Oh no.
And that took me the whole day.
We missed you. Yeah, we did a lot yesterday. We did all the
you did all the book.
we did almost everything. Yeah. So since we only have 4 of you, maybe I'll just sit here.
Relax. We will wait for a few minutes and talk about the
I can show you some examples of things you can do. But maybe we take 5 or 10 minutes and talk about presentations.
Oh, I have to take a quick look.
You missed conflict resolution, civil procedure, criminal procedure, international law, business law, and contract law.
I have that, with the legal basic I can follow.
Yeah.
I hope. Frankly, I just have a quick look. So I need some time, much time to read.
Oh yeah.
I have to search for some definition of the words.
Yeah.
I think so. But I think in this book there are not so much like vocabulary, legal terminology.
If you go to the here. Like here. So here we have more vocabulary, like here some, and here's some vocabulary, and so there actually is a lot of vocabulary. Actually,
Yes, but
here's more.
yes.
Here's more sequittal deliberations, and then civil procedure. Here's plaintiff defendant. This is
Some I know some.
vocabulary. Here's some.
I know some of these.
Yeah. So there is vocabulary when you get to the law chapters. Let's see. So also, wait, that's the. Here, this.
These I know.
Yeah, so there's vocabulary there. Here's some. This is more, not necessarily law, but it has to do with the thing. But there's, if you actually look, you'll find more vocabulary. Oh yeah, and here some vocabulary.
Okay, I think you know that.
Yeah. So there's here more vocabulary.
Oh yeah.
So once you get into the, here's some more vocabulary here. Vocabulary.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's definitely vocabulary. I think maybe just because you
just look at the parts with multiple choice questions so that I can see more vocabulary.
Yeah. Should we start? Should we go ahead and start? Should we start?
Yeah, 5 more minutes, okay?
No, we don't have much time today. We have to finish about 11:20, so we only have 90 minutes. Right here, like page 107. Enforcement here, confidentiality has breach of contract, indemnity clause, liquidated damages clause, boilerplate clauses. So yeah, there's if you actually go through, you'll find a lot of vocabulary. All right. Shall we begin?
That's okay. Thank you.
You're okay now? You're focused now?
Presentation.
Yeah. So page 113. I wanted to just show you, because presentations we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but just a couple of small things. The unit starts with a fun presentation activity. This is just like a warm-up to get the students more comfortable with presentations. So what we have here are 20 proverbs from around the world. And so the students can pick a proverb. And if you have 30 students, maybe that 2 of them can do the same proverb, but you don't want to have 10 students pick the same one. But what they do is they pick a proverb and they make a short presentation. And there's an example at the top. So you greet the audience, introduce yourself, introduce your proverb, tell the audience what it means, and then relate it to your life or future. So this is just like a 1-minute presentation. So you give the students a couple minutes to prepare. And they'll do something like this. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to my presentation. My name is Dieter, and I'm a student here. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's why you said wait a few minutes. Now I understood.
Yeah.
You knew.
It's a way up.
Yeah. She's like, wait a few more minutes, and then I said, okay.
Because I know that.
Yes.
They're coming.
I thought you wanted to chit chat. Okay. Morning. All right. Good morning. We have a new participant today. Thank you for coming. So today is our last morning together. And then, so we'll make the most of it. We have about 90 minutes, and then we're going to end. So today we're going to talk very, very quickly about the unit on presentation skills. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the basic book. And then we can talk about assessment. Or maybe we'll do assessment second, because I know you might have some questions, so we can do that. And then I'll give you a little introduction to the basic book. The basic book is going to be easier. So it's similar to this book, but it's at an easier level, and it also has grammar activities. That's the main difference. Okay? So let's go to page 113. 113, presentation skills. What I wanted to just show you is, this is just so you understand how this works. We start out with kind of a fun introductory presentation using proverbs from around the world. So students pick a proverb and then they make about a 1-minute presentation. So it's very short. The purpose of the activity is to get the students, because they don't have a lot of time to prepare. You might give them a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes to prepare. So it kind of puts them on the spot. It gives them a chance to kind of get up in front of a room, in front of an audience, and have to speak without a lot of preparation. So it's kind of like a good way to introduce the idea of presentations, because in presentations, and even when you prepare for a court case or something, preparation and practice is important. And so this activity doesn't give them much practice or preparation. So it's a good way to lead into the importance of having more time. So basically, the students pick one. I usually write 1 through 20 on the board. And so if I have 30 students, I want to have at least one student do every proverb, and so that way we can keep track, and then some of them can do the same proverb. But it's just a really simple thing. Like, let's do, I'll just pick number 1 since it's there. Okay, go with her. Okay, so good morning. So this is what you want the students to do. So as a teacher, I will model. Usually I tell my students to pick one for me. Why don't you guys pick one for me? We'll do it the same way. So tell me which proverb you want me to talk about. Number 5. Okay. Oh, it's a Vietnamese one.
I don't understand.
You don't understand. Okay. Okay. So I would give the students a few minutes to prepare, but when I, as a teacher, do it, I don't prepare. I just do it. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Dieter, and I'm a student here at the University of Economics and Law. Today, I'm going to talk about a Vietnamese proverb, number 5. If you run after 2 hares, you'll catch neither. Now, hare here doesn't mean hare, it means rabbit. Rabbit. So if you run after 2 rabbits, you'll catch neither. And to me, this means that if you don't focus on one thing, it's hard to achieve anything. And so the way I relate this to life is, if my goal is to become a lawyer and become a good lawyer, I need to put a lot of focus on that so that I can achieve something. Because if I try to do too many things, if I say maybe a prosecutor, maybe a legal assistant, maybe this, maybe that, I'm not focused and it's difficult to achieve. So the importance is to focus on one thing and really try to achieve that. Thank you. Okay, so that's what I do as a teacher. I model it. Then I give the students a few minutes to prepare the same type of presentation. Because we don't have much time today, I won't have you do it today, but this is kind of the way I do it. So I always do it first, give the students a few minutes, then they take turns and they make presentations, okay? So it would be fun if we had time, but since we don't have much time, I think we should keep going, okay? So that's kind of the way the chapter, the unit starts. Then we just get into strategies. Students have some discussions. Because this course is more student-focused, instead of telling the students strategies, I like to have the students come up with the strategy. So on page 114, we're in part C, the students work in groups and come up with strategies for how to prepare for a presentation and how to deliver a presentation. And so, for example, when you prepare, you should know your audience, right? You should know who you're going to present to so you can prepare. When you're actually delivering the presentation, it's important to maintain eye contact. And so the students work in groups and come up with a list of strategies, and then they share them with the class. On the next page, on page 115, there's also a list. So after we talk about them, they also have a list here of strategies, okay? Then on page 116, and we won't do this now because we don't have a lot of time, but there's a video on presentation skills. So the students, okay, oh, I see. So the students first do the vocabulary. So we have vocabulary that's in the video, and then they listen and they write down the strategy and the detail. Okay, so it's just so they've kind of already prepared this through talking, but now they're actually going to watch a video on it. Okay, and again, we won't watch the video today because we don't have a lot of time, but just so you can see. And then we get into the format of a presentation. So the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And one of the things about presentations is when you give a presentation in the introduction, you tell the audience what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them in the body, and in the conclusion, you tell them what you told them. So it's kind of an interesting strategy, right? So we outline the main points, we say it, and then we tell them what you said. So there's a nice breakdown here of a sample. But if you look at page 118, so in the introduction, we want the students to introduce themselves. And we're going to do team presentations because if you have 30 students, you don't want to have 30 presentations. So if you put them in maybe groups of 3, then it's 10 presentations. So it's nice. It doesn't take too much time, but it still gives them a chance to present. So this is an example of a team presentation. So for example, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to our presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce the members of our team. My name is Zung Win, this is Ming Tang, and this is Hang Lei. Now, attention getter. We want to do something in the introduction to get the attention, okay? So imagine waking up to a world where clean air and stable climate are no longer a distant dream, but a reality we can create. So something that gets them, or maybe a figure, currently, 50 million metric tons of plastic goes into the ocean every year. Something that's shocking, okay? So we get our attention, we give the topic and the purpose of our presentation, we outline it. This is where we tell them what we're going to say. We've divided our presentation into 3 parts, blah, 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 blah. The timing, and then when the audience can ask questions. So this is just a basic structure for an introduction. In the body, the main thing we want to do is show them how to transition from one speaker to the next. So if I'm the first speaker and I finish my part, I want to hand it off to the next speaker. So that covers everything I wanted. So let's start with, normally what I do is I have the first speaker do the introduction and the first part. The second speaker do the second part. The third speaker does the third part and concludes. So it's a nice flow. We don't have to go through everything here, but basically what this does is it outlines how to transition through the body. So if I'm going to hand it off to you, I could say, okay, that covers everything I wanted to talk about today, and I'm going to hand it off, blah, blah, blah. So we transition from one speaker to the next. And then in the conclusion, we transition by saying that covers everything we wanted to talk about today. You summarize, you have a concluding sentence, you thank the audience, and you invite them for questions. So it's sort of a very structured format, but it works really, really well for students to be able to give an organized presentation. Okay? So again, we don't have to go through step by step everything. Then on page 120, we talk about visual aids. I go to so many presentations everywhere around the world, and so many people don't know how to make good visual aids. They put too much stuff on it. They try to fill up the slide with lots of text and too many pictures. And sometimes there's a graph that's in the corner. It's like, I can't see anything. Right? So we also want our students to become aware of how to make effective visuals. So when they make their presentations, they're also working on visual aids. So these are just some examples. And they can talk about what they like or don't like about each one of the slides in groups. And if you notice, the first 2 slides look almost the same, but the first one is only a graph, and the second one has a lot of text. So which one do you think is better? The first one. We want to lean. The second one pretty much says what you say, but you don't need to put it on the slide. And so you notice like this, the third slide is very visual. It has pictures. The fourth slide is nice and clean. Right? The last slide has what? The very last one is too crowded. So we want to get this idea that we don't want to put too much on a slide. And visuals are helpful. Not too many words, keeping it very simple. So that's kind of an activity for the students to do together. And then their activity is to create a team presentation. And it talks a little bit about the body, the conclusion, and then they'll be graded on eye contact, body language, voice, the things they'll be graded on. And then on page 122 is kind of an outline of an idea for a presentation. We want it to be related to law somehow, maybe creating a new law. So this is about plastic production and plastic waste and how to deal with that. So it gives some examples of things that you might put in a presentation. Okay? Yeah, I understand that issue sometimes. So not every presentation has a graph, right? Or a chart. But one thing I see a lot is presenters kind of almost write down, they read the slides pretty much. They put everything on. The idea is to put keywords and phrases, right? So instead of saying the University of Economics Law and Law in Ho Chi Minh City was founded in blah, 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 you could put UEA or UEL, founded whatever year. So you can put key points without writing the whole sentence, okay? So that's what I see a lot is when you say you fill the slide. What happens when somebody has a lot of text on the slide? What do? You're just reading.
Not focus on the speaker.
Exactly. Yeah. So when there's a lot of text, the audience focuses, they start reading. They just start reading and they don't pay attention to the speaker. Keep in mind, when you present, you are the presenter. The PowerPoint it helps, but it's not everything. And so we want to think about how to use it as a way to support without it becoming, a reading exercise.
The student have a new practice. When I present my slide, they will take a photo with their phone so that they don't need to write anything on there. Don't write anything. They just take a photo and that's all. Now, I don't even know that they will read it after.
They may or may not read it, yeah.
Yeah, they will read it. They never read it. For themselves. They just read it. They didn't read it.
Let me see if I have something here. So this is, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. This is just this is not really, I'm not really the director of Ocean Plus, but this is an example of maybe just visually how you can see. So if I'm giving a presentation, I might say, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Dieter Brun, and I'm the director of an organization called Ocean Plus, which is advocating for cleaning up our oceans. Then, I'm going to start by asking you a question. So this is our attention getter. How many plastic bottles do you buy per day? How many plastic bottles do you often buy per day? Or plastic bottles or plastic cups? A lot? Never. Okay. Never. So some of you are good, but you buy how many? 2 this morning already. Okay. So, oops. Oh, wait. Globally, in the world, humans buy 1 million bottles per minute in the world. Per minute. That is 60 million bottles per hour. By the time we finish this lecture, or actually in the 10 minutes that I'm going to talk today, in 10 minutes, 10 million bottles will have been bought. So we use a lot of plastic as humans. So today, I'm going to talk about the problem of plastic solution, of plastic consumption, and then I'm going to offer a solution. Okay? The purpose is to really look at how we can solve this issue globally and make our oceans a much cleaner place. My presentation will last about 10 minutes, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of my presentation. So that's my introduction. Okay? Let's talk about the problem. And I'd like to call your attention to the following graph, which shows plastic production in the world from 1917 to 2017. And as you can see, up until the 1950s, we had almost no plastic production. But since the mid-1950s, it has skyrocketed to over 400 million tons of plastic per year. Okay, so I don't have to do the whole presentation, but what I'm showing you is kind of my slides. My slides are these are visual, right? Talking about the problem. These are different problems. Now our solution, right? So this particular presentation is very visual, right? It uses a lot of images. This is extremely different from yours, but just to show you that sometimes we don't need a lot of text. Like when I talk about plastic production, like this one here is very effective, right? I don't need anything else on here because you can see it, right? You can see it and it's very visual. So one of the things we want our students to think about is how to limit text and how to make it clear and not overcrowded, okay? And the big thing is, and it's possible that you need text. This is extremely visual. It's kind of the opposite, but even if you have text, you know, even with here, when I said I'm going to talk about, even here, the problem, 8 million metric tons of plastic in oceans per year. I didn't write a whole long sentence, you know. Globally, there are blah, blah, blah. I could have made this into a long paragraph, but I just put the main point and a visual. So we want to kind of teach our students how to be clear with PowerPoint, okay? And again, it doesn't mean we can't use, this one again is very visual. We can use text, but we don't want to have a lot of, let me see, a lot of long sentences. Here's another example. Let me see. I was going to find one more here. I have so many presentations. Legal English, no. I was going to see if I have another one here I can show you. So if you notice here, this is my outline. I don't write long sentences. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the iceberg model of culture. Then I'll move to cultural dimensions, which includes communication style, blah, 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 blah. Third, I'll talk about the impact on communication. And finally, I'll conclude by giving you some tips for how you can be successful in a different country. And then, so if you notice here, so I just use keywords. I'm not writing long sentences, right? So what I'm going to say here is oftentimes an iceberg is used to symbolize culture. And if you look at an iceberg, we have the part at the top that's visible, and we have the part below the surface which is hidden. Which part is bigger? The hidden part. And culture is the same way. We have visible culture, which is things at the top, and then we have hidden culture, which are the things that are harder to tell in a culture. And if we can understand what's hidden, That's going to help us be more successful, okay? So let's start by talking about surface culture. The things that we can see in a culture. What people wear, the music, the art, the literature, how people greet. If you go to Japan, people bow, right? The language, holidays, food, these are all things we can see or hear or smell, okay? Very easy to tell differences. The problem we get is when we go into the deep part, the part that's hidden, things like, so you can see here, I'm talking a lot, but I'm only showing the key words, right? So this is kind of the idea of creating slides, right? So I'm not putting long sentences, I'm using key phrases to describe things, okay? So anyway, we won't go through the whole thing, but just sort of as an example of how we can encourage students to create better visuals, okay? Does that help you a little bit? Yeah. Yeah, I understand because you want to write it all out, but if you notice, all my slides, they have just bullet points with short points. I say a whole sentence, but I only put on the slide the key points.
Sometimes I try and because in laws, it get worse, so that we have to put the whole sentence to understand the meaning behind that disposition.
Yeah, sometimes you might have to.
Yeah.
But if you always do that, then you'll get the tendency everybody will read. So if it's important, then write the whole thing. But decide what's important and what you can write as bullet points, and that should help. Okay? Cool. Okay, let's talk. Any questions? We have about 1 more hour, so I'm going to make sure we get through everything. I want to move to assessment because I know that's really important. And I think the basic book we can spend some time, but because it's not that much different, it's just easier and it has grammar, we can go through it pretty quickly. But some of you asked about how do we assess students, right? So I put together a few ideas that you can use. It's not everything because I didn't have a lot of time, but I wanted to give you a few ideas of types of things you can do for assessment. Okay. Okay. So think about how the book is structured. The book has a lot of reading games, reading relays, jigsaws, case studies, right? So a lot of the book is interactive types of things. So how do you test it? How do you test it? So a couple of ideas for testing is one, we talked about negotiations and we talked about positions and interests. You were here. No, you were here. So one thing to do is you could give a short scenario. Like, for example, Ming works at a big law firm. He's been working there for 3 years, and he works very hard, but no one ever acknowledges him. Because of this, he's a bit frustrated, so he wants to meet with his boss and ask for a promotion and a raise. He wants a raise because we'll show him that the law firm appreciates the good work he does. He also plans to get married next year, and he hopes to buy an apartment. Okay? So what is Ming's position? To get married and buy an apartment, to continue working at the law firm, or to receive a promotion and a pay raise? His position. What's his position? Remember, position is what you want. Interest is kind of why you want it or what's behind it. Okay? So what does he want? He wants a raise and a promotion. That's his position. When he goes to talk to his boss, that's what he's going to say. I want a promotion and a raise. What are his interests? Let's look at this. What are his interests? To be acknowledged and to provide for his family? To receive more money in a higher position? Or to move to a different law firm where they appreciate him more? What's his interest? To be acknowledged. This is paraphrased, but buying a house, getting married, it's providing. It's right. If I get married and I want to have an apartment for my family, that means I provide for my family. So this is a way of helping the student, like giving the students a couple questions based on what they learned about negotiations. And then I have a couple questions here, like which type of negotiator has the most trouble building long-term relationships? Soft, hard, or principled? How does a principled negotiator view his or her counterpart? Friends, adversaries, or problem solvers? Problem solvers. So if you think about, with negotiations, we did a lot of work on interests and position, and we talked a lot about the different types of negotiators. So these are just some questions you could have related to negotiations, okay? Conflict resolution, I just picked a couple of chapters. I didn't do all of them because I didn't have time, but conflict resolution, I just have a couple of questions here. Which of the following approaches to conflict generally leads to win-win outcomes? Avoidance, collaboration, or competition? Collaboration. Which of the following best describes the steps to take in conflict resolution? Listen actively, acknowledge, empathize, reassure, resolve. Listen actively, state your side, tackle the problem, resolve. Or state your side, stress your reasons, compromise, and resolve. Which one's the best? A. Okay, so this is just, these are just examples. Okay? Business law. So here's an example, because one of the things we did in the book a lot was comparing and contrasting the US and Vietnam. Okay? So this is a reading, because in the course they do a lot of reading. Okay? So we should test reading. And we should test it kind of similar to how they did it in class. So this is differences between business law and the US. So business law in the United States and Vietnam share some similarities, but also, it should be not exhibits, but also exhibit notable differences. Both countries have legal frameworks that govern commercial activities, aiming to ensure fairness, transparency, and protection of parties involved in business transactions. And then, so similarities. One common feature is the emphasis on contract law. In both the US and Vietnam, contracts play a crucial role in defining the rights and obligations of parties entering into business agreements. Additionally, both legal systems recognize the importance of protecting intellectual property, encouraging innovation, and fostering a competitive business environment. So we have the similarities, right? However, there are significant differences in the two legal systems. In the US, business law is primarily based on common law, which relies on judicial decisions and precedents. This means that court decisions in similar cases become guiding principles for future cases. So in the US, a lot of times, decisions are made based on past cases, right? On the other hand, Vietnam follows a civil law system where laws are codified and legal interpretations are less reliant on precedents. So it's a difference. Another direct distinction lies in regulatory environment. The US has a well-established regulatory framework with federal and state laws governing various aspects. Okay, blah, blah, blah. It's such as antitrust, security, and employment. In Vietnam, the legal landscape is evolving with ongoing efforts to align regulations with international standards. And then labor laws also differ between the two countries. While the US emphasizes employment at will, allowing employers to terminate employees for various reasons, Vietnam has more stringent regulations, particularly regarding termination procedure and severance pay. In summary, while the US and Vietnam share, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so one thing you can do is create a reading, and I would recommend, how many of you have ever used ChatGPT? It's artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT. So what I did, I'm going to give you an example. I went into ChatGPT and I said, create a passage that talks about the similarities and differences between Vietnam and create 5 multiple choice questions. I wanted to just see it because I want to show you that sometimes we get really overwhelmed with, oh my God, I have to do this. If you can create a good prompt in ChatGPT, sometimes, usually when I do something in ChatGPT, I have to change a few things. Maybe I change some of the answers or something, but it gives a good starting point instead of having, and the other thing is, as a non-native speaker, it's difficult to create something like this from scratch. And that's good to know, because ChatGPT is not perfect. The version that you pay for, the newer version, is actually better than the older version. But I find that for certain things, like, because I didn't have time to really do much with this, because you said create some questions for us. I said, oh gosh, I don't have time. So I popped this in, but the key with ChatGPT, the most important thing is the prompt. What you tell ChatGPT to do. Because if you give very basic information, the more detail you can give, the better. Sometimes I give it very detailed information about what I want. I even tell what level of English I want it to be at. If I want multiple choice questions, I say, create 5 multiple choice questions with 3 answer choices. Yeah, And sometimes I'm frustrated because I feel like the answers are too easy, so I might have to change them. But anyway, it's a tool that you can use, particularly if you're creating test questions. So if you want to, because we did a thing like with civil law in the U.S. and Vietnam, criminal law. So we kind of this is a structure that's used a lot in the book. So it makes sense that a reading is going to be similar to what they've been doing in the book, but just this is a twist. So it's a different topic, but it's the same type of reading. So this is similar to what they've done in class. And one thing about assessment is you don't want assessment to be so much different from what they've done in class. Some teachers, they said, oh, I'm going to test this in a very different way. And sometimes the students don't understand the format of the test because it's different and it's new. I was, many years ago, I was the chair of the English department at a college in Thailand. And we had to create, so say for level 1 English, there were 6 teachers. Everybody had to give the same test. And so one of the teachers always wanted to create questions that were very different. And so one of the things we focus on is making sure that the students are familiar with this type of format, okay? So this format is the same format as we have in the book. Does that make sense? ChatGPT can help us, And I didn't have time to really run through and do all the details here, but I wanted to show you that this is kind of an example. I didn't write this, right? AI wrote this. I made a couple of small corrections. There was something grammar that was a little awkward, so I fixed it. And sometimes I fix the answers because they're too easy. It's like, oh, this question, but at least it gives a general framework. So I encourage you to, you can, if you don't have it yet, you can sign up for free. I haven't used the paid version yet, but I'm thinking about it. But I feel like for the level, like for you with high level law, maybe it's not as good, but for something like this, it works really well. Yeah. Yeah, it works really well. And so, you know, you can even tell it to tell you what the answers are. Like it'll even tell you, like it'll say question 1, the answer C, question 2. So even that, you can get that information if you want to. Yeah, so that's kind of I can show you, let me see. No. And then show you a couple more questions. So the first one is something that they should have learned. Well, I can send this to you guys so you have some examples. But in defendant, A is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, B is guilty based on a preponderance of evidence, or C could not have committed the crime he is charged with. What's the answer? In criminal law in the US, the prosecution must prove that the defendant what? The prosecution must prove that the defendant do you know the answer? It's actually A. So the prosecution is the one trying to put you into prison. The defense is is supporting you. So you're on trial. You're the defendant. If I'm the prosecution, I want to prove that you are guilty. And in criminal law, it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil law, it's a preponderance of evidence. That's the difference. And if it said in criminal law, the defense must what, blah, blah, blah. The defense tries to show that the defendant didn't commit the crime or is innocent. But the prosecution wants to prove that the defendant is, yeah. And again, we kind of went through this quickly, so, you know. But this is a type of question we can ask. And it also just sort of shows a difference between criminal law and civil law. Okay? Or, which of the following is not true about the US and Vietnam? A suspect in both the US and Vietnam is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Prosecutors in the US and Vietnam play similar roles. The role of judges differs between the US and Vietnam. Which one is not true? Presumed innocent until proven guilty is not true. That's true.
That's true. You are innocent
Until
you are proven guilty.
Yeah.
And that's why when you stand in front of the judge, you don't wear the criminal uniform.
Yeah.
And you wear
Yeah, you're innocent until proven guilty. What about B? So we went through this quickly and we didn't do detailed work yesterday, so you may not know of the answers. But these are sample questions. But in the unit on criminal law, There is one reading specifically about the differences between prosecutors in the US and Vietnam. So students should know that it's different. So it's not the same. Okay? But anyway, these are, again, we're just looking at sample questions, right? And civil law, for civil law, here's a case. So we did one reading on differences. This is a case in civil law about a motorcycle crash between two motorcycles in Ho Chi Minh City. Okay? And so the students read the case, and then they answer some questions. Okay? And how are we doing on time? We could go through this. Okay. Should we do this together? So in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, two individuals, Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Chan, found themselves involved in a motorcycle accident on a busy intersection. Mr. Nguyen was riding his motorbike when Mr. Chan, coming from the opposite direction, failed to yield at a traffic signal and collided with Mr. Nguyen. As a result of the collision, Mr. Nguyen had some scrapes and bruises, and Mr. Chan sprained his ankle. In addition, both individuals suffered damage to their respective motorbikes. Mr. Nguyen claims that he had the right of way and followed all traffic rules, while Mr. Chan argues that his view was obstructed by a temporary construction sign preventing him from seeing the traffic signal. The traffic police arrived and documented the incident, collecting statements from both parties and any available witnesses. The police report indicated that Mr. Chan indeed failed to yield at the signal, and the temporary construction sign was not deemed a valid excuse for the violation. Now the case is brought to the civil court for resolution. So that's just a simple case, right? Okay. Then the students have some questions. What caused the motorcycle accident in Ho Chi Minh City? What caused it? Mr. Nguyen's reckless driving, Mr. Chan's failure to yield at a traffic signal, or the temporary construction sign? B. Yeah, they said that the construction sign was not the reason, but it's talked about in the case, and so we call that a distractor, right? We mention that in the reading, but the answer is B, right? Because it said, the temporary construction sign was not deemed a valid excuse, so it wasn't the excuse, okay? So the police report indicated that he failed to yield. He failed to yield at the signal. So anyway, so we have distractors in there, okay? What injuries did both parties suffer? What injuries? Severe injuries, minor injuries, damage to their motorbikes. Yeah. So their motorbikes were damaged, but that's not considered an injury, right? And one person had bruises, scrapes, one sprained an ankle, so nothing serious, right? Okay. So why does Mr. Tran, so anyway, so we have some questions. Why does Mr. Tran claim innocence in the accident? What was his reason? Yeah, he claims his view was obstructed by, that's what he said. What did the traffic police report reveal about the accident? Mr. Nguyen caused the collision, Mr. Chan followed all traffic rules, or Mr. Chan failed to yield at the signal? He failed to yield, right? And then, based on the information in the case, who will likely win the civil trial? Huh?
We mentioned that we need to wait for the rules and to come to you, but I don't think that's enough to solve the case.
Now think about
What they said. Yeah, what they said.
think about a civil case. Think about a civil case. It's not a criminal case. Civil case means more than 50% sure. So that's the difference between criminal law and civil law. In civil law, we call preponderance of evidence more than 50%. So based on the information in the case, who will likely win the trial? Mr. Win, Mr. Chan, or there is not enough information? The police, the police report said, what did the police report say? The police report said,
The signal is not a valid skill.
yeah, the police report said that he failed to yield at the signal. So the police even said that who was guilty? Who? Right. So who will likely win? Mr. Win. Yeah, Mr. Win will likely win. Mr. Win will win. Win will win. Anyway, so this is just an example of, again, a type of thing you can put into the midterm or the final doesn't have to be only knowledge about information. It can be a case, or it can be a reading on a comparison, or it can be a listening. You could pick a listening that's related to what they've learned and have questions about the listening, okay? So for me, this is the kind of test I would write, these types of questions, and probably have a listening on something that's related to what we've learned, okay? Because we want to test, and maybe if you want to, the thing about writing, what's the problem with putting writing on a test? Pros and cons. Why is it good to put writing? Takes time. As a teacher, if you have a writing question, a question with writing, then you have to read 30 answers. It's good because it shows what the students, how their writing maybe has improved. So you could have one writing maybe that says, write a paragraph about one of these topics. Maybe limit it to 6 sentences, so it's short. So you could have writing, but I think there are pros and cons. I know when you're a teacher, sometimes it takes a long time to grade. So do some knowledge questions, which we had here. Knowledge about things that are emphasized, not small details, but something like in negotiations, we went through fast, so we actually talked a lot about position and interests. And even in the alpha-beta negotiation, we talked about position and interests. So position and interests are something that we could test, right? But you don't want to find something little that was not emphasized and test that. So we want to test things that are emphasized. So I would do some knowledge, and then I would do at least maybe a reading, like a comparison, like we have here. And I would do a case study, and I can send it to you and you can distribute it. So this is just samples, but I can send it so you have already, maybe the test is already halfway done if you use this stuff. Okay? Does that make sense? What questions do you have about assessment? Oh, the other thing you can use for assessment, the reason I put presentations at the very end is because presentations are a great way to do assessments. Because the students have learned about soft skills and they learn about law, and now they have to put it together and do a team presentation. So team presentations are a form of assessment, right? So you're assessing them on different aspects of their presentations, so that can be a way to assess them. So that's why, because normally presentations is maybe something interesting to do at the end of the term. Questions? No questions? Questions? No questions? Do you feel better about assessment?
I'm
Very
very worried.
worried.
She worried. I'm not intelligent to do something like that.
Well, this is, yeah. If you want, I can try to create a few more questions before I send it.
Yeah, maybe if we just decide one or two tests, okay. But if the cost, we have many costs, so we just test bank, so the source, the resources to make the test will become limited, so that's will become worry for us.
But if you have a test bank, I mean, you could have like 3 or 4 different readings on comparison, right? And then you could have 4 different cases like this one, right? And then so you don't do the same one every time, right? Because the thing is, if you do it every time, the student will say, hey, here's the test, right? So it's different each time. So you can do that. But this at least gives you an idea of kind of how, and like I said, Chat GPT can help you with the cases or the comparison. Yeah. But I think you don't have to create most of it yourselves, especially the readings. The readings you can use Chat GPT for. And again, you might change a few things. Like sometimes they say, sometimes the questions are too easy. It's so obvious. They'll say like, where did the accident take place? Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, or Da Nang? And the first sentence says, in Ho Chi Minh City, there was an accident. So it's too easy for this level. Maybe for level A1, it's okay, but for these students, so those kind of questions you have to get rid of and replace it with something else, like who will likely win the case? Or, you're thinking about, like, is this question too easy? Maybe I need to change it. Or maybe the question's good, but maybe the answers could be a little bit changed to make it a little more challenging, okay? But that's kind of the key with assessment. It doesn't have to be so complicated because we're testing how we run the class, right? So, yeah. Any questions?
One thing I consider about is the sources. When we want to assess students, right, for listening or some cases, this is my work.
Well, for the sources, so if you use Chat GPT, they don't usually cite the sources, they just give you it. If you're using listening from online, maybe you cite the source. But the thing is, when somebody puts something on YouTube, it's generally you can use it for academic purposes. You're not selling it. You're not taking it and selling it. So you notice in the book, I have a lot of videos. I found them all on YouTube, right? So I'm not selling the book and making money from their videos. The book I'm giving to you. So but you can, generally for academic purposes, it's not a problem to take something from YouTube and use it in class. It's not a problem. What would be a problem is if you claimed that you created the video. Like if you said, I created this video, but you took it from YouTube, it's different. Okay? For me, videos take time because the videos I found here, I watched many videos.
Talk to a lecturer, which one is the best for students to do the test? the midterm test or in the final examination, which would be suitable for them? I think it's difficult.
That can be. It can be challenging. And I can, like I said, I can try to find a couple examples for you, maybe that would be good. Yeah, because with listening, you want to find a video that's suitable, and then you have to create questions that are answerable. So it takes some time.
Select which one is the best choice
Yeah.
for examination.
Cool. Other questions?
I know that you have another book that is the basic one. So can we use that this book for the student practice exam, or maybe have some further study?
So the basic book is really designed for students who have a lower level of English. So the idea is if I'm at A2 English, this book is too hard for me.
Big one.
Yeah, this is more B1-ish. Some of it's up to B2 minus, but it's more like B1, B1 plus, pushing a little bit into B2 a little bit. So a student at level A2 would have a lot of difficulty with this one. So the other book is designed for students more at A2-ish.
To a longer than
Yeah, really A2 ideally.
yeah. So it's like a general.
Yeah, it's with a focus on law-related topics.
Yeah.
But it's really more like, yeah, it's still legal English, but simplified for more basic students. Maybe we can look at, let me show you a couple units in here. The idea, the embassy wants to sponsor a legal English symposium where representatives from universities all over Vietnam come together to talk about legal English, to talk about best practices. So it's a nice way to share, because like like the University of Law in Hanoi University of Law, they have a legal English degree, and they've been doing it for a long time. So it's interesting to just talk to and learn from different schools about what they're doing. I'm also introducing all this to a lot of universities, but there are universities I'm not introducing it to. So it sort of brings people from around the country together. My intention is to be there, depending when the date is, because in February I go to Laos for a month, and then I'll go to the US, but I'll be back by mid-April. I'll be back. So if it's in April or May or later, I'll be in Vietnam. So I intend to be there.
So because they intend to up now sometime my April.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll talk to them too about dates so that I can make sure I'm here. Yeah, but I would like to be here, and it should be a really good event.
Yeah, sure. You need to be there.
Yes, I know. So I'll talk to the embassy and let them know when I'll be back, so that they can, maybe when we schedule it, we can schedule it when I'm back. Cool. So let's take we have about 15-20 minutes. I just want to talk a little bit about the basic legal English course, so you can kind of see how it's a little bit different. So the idea is to give students at a lower level of English an opportunity to start to learn about legal English. But it's at a level that's easier than this book, okay? So I thought we could walk through, because criminal law is in both books. Okay. So when we talk about, we're thinking about someone who has more limited English. We have a discussion, what is criminal law? So they can talk about this. What are some common crimes? And which crimes do you think are the worst?
My personally, I think criminal law is the field that has the most difficult vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And in non-language. But in other fields, like civil law or labor law, we can easily
Hi.
find this.
Good morning. Yeah.
We can easily find these terms in normal English, so it will be really easier for us to transfer the idea to students. But we will not I don't see it in the real life.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the unit. Yeah, I agree. I know it's very complicated, and probably in the basic book it'll come later. And maybe the idea, what you said, is to have some easier things like employment law or something that's a little easier. But let's take a look. So there's some terms here, some vocabulary that they can match. And then we're just walking through the basic book. We just talked about, you missed it, we just talked about assessment. I gave them some examples, and I'll send it so that the teachers have access. I created some sample questions so that they have some guidance for assessment. Okay. So kind of the same thing, doing predictions. And then reading relay. So we have some of the same types of activities, but it's the reading's at an easier level. And I can go through this too and make sure that it's not too hard for them. But we do kind of the same thing, like listening, vocabulary. Here's a case study. So I want to show you this part. So one of the things with this book is that we include grammar. That's kind of a big difference. So in this one, WH questions, because in criminal law, we're often asking people, well, where were you? What happened? What did you see? Who were you with? What time did it happen? So WH questions work well with this unit. So the idea with the grammar is, I've seen some books where the grammar has nothing to do with the unit. Like they'll put grammar into a book, but then the grammar is just the grammar and it's separate. So one of the things I'm doing in this book is trying to use grammar that fits with whatever topic we do. So when we talk about criminal law, WH questions work well, okay? So here are some examples, and it shows the structure here too. Like you start with the WH question word, then you have the verb, you have a noun or pronoun, and then you complete the question. So it gives them some structure to work with. Human brains, we're wired for patterns. Our brains are wired naturally for patterns. Children in the United States, when they're very little, they'll say something like, I eated a hamburger, instead of, why do they say I eated a hamburger? Why? It's very common. Almost every child in the United States, when they're very little, they'll do the same thing. I eated a hamburger. Because ED means past tense. So our brains naturally pick up patterns. And the pattern that young children pick up is ED is past tense. It's not that they think in their mind, oh yes, well, let me tell you, when I create the past tense, they just do it because they recognize the pattern, and then they use the pattern like I wanted, whatever. And so our brains are naturally wired. So something like this connects with the wiring in our brain, right? So we're putting it in this way, so there's a WH, it's like a structure, okay? It's like in Vietnam, you could say, you have no chua though, but you can say, Em vui home? Right? So home creates the question, right? So now I can be like, oh, blah, 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 home. I can start to create questions as I'm learning Vietnamese, right? Because now I get the pattern. So that's what we're doing here, is creating a pattern. Yep. And so then they can start to use it, like which WH, like when did the robbery take place? Where were you? Did you run away with? Why did you run away when the police arrived? Right? Did you get from the party? How? So anyway, so they're using, and then this one has role plays. So they have simple scenarios, a police officer and a witness, and then the police officer interviews the witness, right? And so the police wants to ask these questions, and the witness has this information. So if you're the witness, I'll say, when did the crime occur? Right? So you can answer. So they get a chance to use the language in kind of in a role play situation. Okay? So this is kind of the way that it's structured. Here's another scenario. Okay? So they each get a chance to be this one is a prosecutor and a defendant. So this would be in court, but same thing. We want to ask questions like, you want to know where the defendant was at the time of the crime. Well, where were you at the time of the crime? I was at a restaurant with my friend. So they can practice. Okay? So this is kind of where this particular book incorporates grammar into it, so that the students are actively using correct grammar in legal type of contexts. Does that make sense? So if you think about legal English, and especially when you're at somewhat lower, the students are still improving their language skills at the same time, right? So WH questions might be challenging for students. So they're improving their grammar while using legal concepts. Does that make sense? So it's not only learning about the vocabulary and the content, but also how to speak correctly. The thing about even someone at an intermediate level might need help as well. But if you think about it, and you're right, maybe naturally you would study general English, and then eventually you would move into legal English when you have a certain level. But it's possible at a somewhat lower level to have topics that are related to law that still allow you to improve your English, but your contexts are more law related. So if you study general English, sometimes they start with things like going to the grocery store, talking on the phone, going shopping, hobbies. Those are common topics that you start to use when you learn English. And so now we're doing things like, maybe there's going to be something here too about describing a crime and describing a criminal. I can show you. It's not done, but maybe this will help you. Describing a crime. Okay, police, where did you see the man? Okay, what did he look like? He was short and stocky. He had black hair and brown eyes. What was he wearing? He was wearing red pants. So this is maybe describing a person is often in general English class. But in this case, we're going to relate it to a criminal. And so, xin chào. And so with a criminal, so we're describing a criminal or a suspect, but we're using, this is pretty basic English. You know, what did he look like? He was short and stocky. He had black hair and brown eyes. And things we wear, maybe some vocabulary that's a little harder, like hoodie, vest, tank top, poncho. And so here's an example. Like, what did he look like? He was tall and slim. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. What was he wearing? He was wearing blue jeans, a red t-shirt, brown eyes, and headphones. Okay? So the context here is describing someone who you saw committing a crime. So our context is crime related, law related, but the content is it's still general, right? But if you think about it as so a course like basic, we're not thinking about judgments or anything yet because the students don't have enough language yet. So what we do is we give them some legal topics, but at a very simple level, at the basic book. The next book, which is the one we've spent a lot of time on, is more an intermediate book. That one gets more into depth, but we're still, you kind of build, you build up to certain levels. But the basic book is really designed so that students who are at a lower level can start to learn a bit about legal English.
Okay, so the whole was the almost like we don't need so much pressure on the student. Just that the outcome are also important.
Yeah, this is for the basic course. Yeah. So it gets progressively harder. So the basic course is more, I guess you'd say, more general English with a focus on legal topics. So you can't take a student at that level and give them very complex, super complex things. It's too hard. But you introduce them to some concepts, even criminal law, which is complicated, but trying to simplify it so that they become more comfortable with law terms, even things like defendant or prosecutor, guilty, not guilty.
Okay, right now is after coming out of school, the student will become pretty wrong. So now I think okay, if we just need the general English,
For the basic course is really, yeah. But you can see, like, we have criminal law, but we have even this one. It's the law related. Like, somebody commits a crime, you have a witness there, or you have a suspect. That person is going to be asked those questions. Where were you? And if you're a lawyer, where were you on the night of October 5th? What were you doing? Who were you with? What time did you get home? Why did you drive a different way? Those are questions that are law questions that happen in court. So it's still legal, but it's not like complex, high-level legal terminology.
so do you think that we need some like advanced course for the student?
That's a good question. We've talked about maybe having one more course potentially, which I think would be great. So if the U.S. Embassy will fund it, if the U.S. Embassy would fund it, I would be happy to. But because you're building up, right, to a certain thing. So keep in mind, the basic course is a basic course. It's not super high level. The one that we spent a lot of time on is an intermediate level course.
So when you come back to the embassy, you say, okay, school is not enough for the student to understand English, so we need more.
Well, I think it's more is always good, right?
Yes, the more the better.
Yeah. So I don't know if that will get approved, but we got to finish. So anyway, I think that brings us to a conclusion. Thank you for your participation, your energy, your questions, your ideas. I think this is going to be really exciting for the students. and it will really sort of open up a new pathway for them to start to do legal English. And hopefully we can get one more course approved. I don't know, because I've been here almost 3 years, so the embassy, I don't know if they want to pay me anymore. But if they would, I would love to create another course that's even a little bit more advanced. So we can see how that goes. But thank you very much. It's been great working with all of you. And I hope to see you again soon. And hopefully we'll do the symposium, and I'll be there as well and see you there. So, and keep in touch. I will send the sample test questions so that you have a framework that you can work with, and I'll add a little more to it. So give me a few days so that I can add a little, so you have some ideas of how to do assessments on this book. And thank you so much. Thank you for everything too.